Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
So I want to welcome the program author Joan Hilty, author From Banned to Blowing Up. Joan, thanks for calling.
Thanks so much for having me on the program.
Absolutely, and you have a graphic novel, Explosion in Libraries. So basically, I'm so excited to talk to you, but I really want to talk about, I guess, graphic novels in general, Joan. Seeing the growth of how they've developed in the last couple of years, is really becoming popular.
Absolutely, and just to give a little clarity as to where I am in this picture, I am actually an editor of comic books and graphic novels. I was at DC Comics for a very long time. I currently work as an independent editor. I've always been very interested in this topic because there was a time when graphic novels and comics just could not make it in the door at libraries. They were scorned, they were for kids, or they weren't enough for kids, they were only superheroes. They were frowned upon, and early proponents of them in libraries would go to ALA conventions, including people as big as Neil Gaiman, and just get ignored regarding how effective they were as a category. And now people are absolutely crazy about them, and librarians particularly have become some of the biggest proponents of the format.
Oh, so this was basically a talk you did, so this is not a book. This is more a discussion. You were one of the discussion people on this topic then?
That's right. I put together a good portion of the comics and graphic novel programming here at Miami Book Fair. I help with a few of the panels, and this was one that I thought was very important. It was a very important topic. It was based on an article in Publishers Weekly called that ran back in May, by the comics journalist Heidi McDonald, saying how graphic novels became the hottest section in the library, and I thought that would be a great topic for a panel discussion of how this happened. And the panel, which is taking place this afternoon at Miami Book Fair, features a academic librarian, a teen librarian, a creator, George O'Connor, whose books do very, very well in libraries. He's the author of a graphic novel series about the Greek gods, and a gentleman called Rich Johnson who runs an imprint, a graphic novel imprint at Penguin called Inklet.
Wow, and I know you have a lot of questions as well, Eric, because I'm still trying to understand graphic novels in general. But I mean, I think the expansion of comics and then putting comics together into a novel, it's such a novel. I have to say the word novel idea because I mean, kids really enjoy comics. They love them.
Neil had to come
now
with
they're going to be entertained by not just the pictures, but also the descriptions and the excitement and the different things that will lead them to never putting them down in a certain way. What would you say?
Well, absolutely. And one of the things that librarians love about them so much is that they bring kids into the library. They're great tools for reluctant readers, both kids and adults. And now, whereas in the past they were only, say, about manga comics or superheroes, they are now books on all kinds of topics for kids and adults alike. Sci-fi, fantasy, memoir, historical graphic novels. Anything is possible with this format.
and I like your pun that you had there, Neil, about it being a novel idea. But I really think that, I as a kid who grew up with comic books, and before they had turned the corner to graphic novels, something I always enjoyed, but I think kids just love a good story, especially when it comes to cartoons or comics. I remember as a kid growing up, and the first thing I would grab for in the Sunday paper is the comics. And I really think it's taken a new level because kids enjoy that content, and now I think librarians are excited again because now they can actually bring relevant stories, and it's not something they're afraid of, but it's a new way to educate and to get kids to read.
Absolutely. And it's not just a gateway to reading, it's a gateway to new ways for kids to express themselves. I mean, what's really cool about being a kid in the 21st century is, as I did growing up, you can make your own comics, and these days, with the digital age, that definition is so expanded. You can go and read your favorite graphic novel, and then you can make your own web comic and put it online. And more really talented young artists and storytellers are doing that sort of thing these days. It's not just an educational tool, but it's becoming something where people realize they can tell all sorts of stories, not just stories about Superman and Batman. And I love Superman and Batman, but the possibilities are endless.
Exactly.
And when I gather from this, and in a lot of ways, I think the graphic novels, I wanted to know how they kind of were born in a way. Because, I think about ones that kind of remind me of that, but they're really younger series ones, are like Captain Underpants and things like that, that ultimately, in a way that books became more and more cartoonish to get kids involved in understanding it. But graphic novels expand all the way to adult graphic novels. But what would you say was the birth of them, in your opinion?
Well, in a way, they're really still being born. Comics have been around for a very long time as a global art form here in the United States. Again, they've been largely confined to one genre for many, many years. But the superhero comic, the 22-page superhero comic that once you picked up on newsstands and then you picked up in comic book stores. But in the mid-20th century, a very, very talented man named Will Eisner, for whom comics' premier award ceremony is named, the Eisner Awards, created a book of collected stories about the inhabitants of a Bronx tenement called A Contract with God, and he called it the graphic novel because he felt very strongly that it was a novel-length story, and he gave the format a certain dignity. And I would say that was technically the birth of the graphic novel. But again, it's still being realized. That was what people were most familiar with for a very long time. Then people were familiar with Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is a graphic novel essentially about the Holocaust. There's the graphic novel Fun Home, which is a memoir of a relationship between a father and daughter that is very popular right now and has just been made into a Broadway musical. They are evolving in all sorts of different directions, and all kinds of different publishers are doing them.
Quite interesting, Eric. And again, what is your take? Did you know a lot about graphic novels before starting interviewing at the book fair?
I did not. I'm not. I've only read one or two of them, but I know there's a distinct difference between that and comics. But
Which ones have you read? I'm just curious.
Honestly, I don't recall the name off the top of my head. I have a friend who is a up and coming graphic novelist, and it was more of like proofing a couple of his works. But I don't recall the names off the top of my head. It's been about a year or so.
Okay, great. Well, just have him, if you're local, just have him take you to Tate's, and have him tell you his 5 favorite titles. A lot of those creators are running around the fair this weekend, and that's your jumping off point. There's just so much to explore.
Perfect.
All right, so what would you say, Joan, is your favorite graphic novel of all time? What would you say?
That is so hard.
Question. I know. See, I did that on purpose, Joe.
That is cruel. Do you ask every fiction author what their favorite work of fiction is? Every memoirist what their it's impossible. It's impossible because, again, I love so many different genres. I love the graphic novels of Alan Moore, who people know as the creator of these sort of sci-fi fantasies, Watchmen and V for Vendetta, both of which were made into movies. The graphic novel Fun Home is a fantastic memoir. It's a range. I have favorite superhero graphic novels. I have favorite historical novels. There's also the graphic novel Persepolis that a lot of people are familiar with, which is about a young girl growing up in revolutionary Iran. That is a fantastic book. There's just there's really no end to what's out there. I would say I have 10 or 15 favorites. We'd be here for another 45 minutes.
No, let's see, but then you have to tell me them, Joan, and then we have to stay in touch. I just followed you on Twitter, and so I'll have, because remember I have an author show year round, so I could start having some of these great authors on and highlighting their careers and what they have done in this genre. I think it's so important to bring this up.
Absolutely. Well, and more, and I'll tell you, more and more, I now work with one foot in comics publishing and one foot in prose publishing, as I like to call it, and more authors who have never gotten into comics are understanding that if they want to do a graphic novel, they can. If they've got a vision for a story that needs to be told visually, there are a million just amazing graphic artists out there who can team with them to collaborate on graphic novel. That's the other exciting thing about it. One person may do it, or it may be a fantastic artist-writer combination. And there are just all sorts of artists and writers who create these graphic novels who are, really lighting up, I would say, conventions and book fairs these days.
And it's something that, again, it's great to see. If we can get, especially kids, Joan, to pick up books and read, I'm happy. I'm happy that this is out there, because ultimately our literacy rate is just too poor in this country, and we need to find ways to entertain them, not just by video games, which we talked about before on our show. And I think that when you get to see all these kids come to the Miami Book Fair, and you see so many families, it just must make you so happy, because now we're finally seeing that, this is not just the library's going to have a little special on. No, this is a huge event that's highlighting great authors, and these families value books. That's what I was so amazed when I visited the first year.
Tremendously, and yes, a lot of those books are graphic novels. They're for kids. There's Captain Underpants. There's Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I personally consider a graphic novel, even though it's sort of more like illustrated text. There are the Adventure Time graphic novels that are very popular right now. There's the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, based on the popular animated show that is telling all new stories. I actually edit that series, and I'll be moderating a talk with its writer, Jean Yang, this afternoon. There are so many kid-friendly, importantly, options in this category. It's
amazing, Eric, isn't it?
It really is. It blows my mind with all the stuff they have going on there, too.
Yes.
All right, well, Joan, I know you got a lot more to do, and we have a lot more to finish up in our last half hour of our 6-hour, I'm not going to say marathon. I guess we can
it's feeling like a marathon now, right?
No, not yet. No. I'm ready to keep going, and when I just get I get my zone in interviewing people, and especially if I'm not recording it and I'm not being the producer, it's no big deal. Even though I'm kind of being the executive producer, because I have to text and tweet and do all these different things, and Eric's doing the same thing in his studio, so it's a lot of fun. But where can our listeners learn more about you, Joan, and what you do?
I have a website, joanhilty.net. I also am a book packager, so you can also find me at joan@pgturn.com. That's my company, Page Turner. And I can be found on Facebook and Twitter as well, as you just helpfully mentioned.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.